So I'm going to talk for just a couple minutes about my background, and then I'm going to talk about the book and the larger issues that it raises, and then open it up for what I hope will be some good questions and some good discussion. My work in this arena started kind of in the summer of 1982 when I was riding my bike to the beach in Nahant, Massachusetts. I had been the undergraduate chair of the Harvard Hunger Action Committee, and there's a joke that people tell about Harvard students. How do you know if someone went to Harvard? They usually tell you within the first 60 seconds of meeting them. So, right on time. We used to do these campus-wide fasts for Oxfam America. A couple times a year, we'd ask students to give up a dinner, and the university would reimburse us for the cost of that meal. On the night of the fast, the students would go to Pinocchio's Pizza, but we'd still get the money and we'd give it to Oxfam. But I was studying world hunger at the time and being exposed for the first time to these massive mortality numbers, 23 million people a year, 2/3 of them children dying of hunger and hunger-related disease. And these campus-wide fasts seemed puny in comparison, and it really frustrated me. I wanted to do something big because this issue seemed so huge, and I think this is important for many of us. There are a few exceptions in the room here, but I was 8 years old when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, and now those are as formative years as they come, and this showed me that, wow, if humanity sets a goal in time, some impossible goal in time, we can achieve absolutely impossible things that won't get achieved in the absence of such a goal. And so in college and with hunger, I felt like, there needs to be something like that around this. So I was just riding my bike to the beach this day, and I heard about these two guys who were bicycling across America to raise money for the Jimmy Fund. And it took my breath away, and I said, that's it, that's what I want to organize. So my friend Mark and I went back to school in the fall, and we went to each of the 13 dining halls at Harvard for 13 nights, and we sat there as every student walked by, and we said, will you bicycle across America with us next summer to fight hunger? And the best way to describe it is that everybody said no except for 38 people. So we organized during the course of the year, and that next summer, 6 hours, we flew from Logan to Seattle, and over the course of 9.5 weeks, we pedaled 4,200 miles during a very hot summer across the continental United States. And we raised $80,000 for Oxfam, but more important than that, at the end of this journey, we felt depleted spiritually, physically, psychologically, and I know that was the feeling that I had been looking for, to feel that there was nothing left to give. We had given our all for a cause that we cared about very deeply. So about 10 years later, I moved here to Los Angeles, and I'm sorry, about a year later, and about 10 years after that, I began to lose, like I'm sure many of you, many friends to AIDS. And 1992-93 was a time before protease inhibitors had been developed. A friend of yours would tell you that he was HIV positive. 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, he'd be gone, and he'd be meeting his parents at his memorial service in the Hollywood Hills for the first time. It was similar to that issue of hunger. Here was huge grief and huge passion to do something about this issue, but nothing big the average person could do. You could buy a red ribbon, you could go to a black tie dinner. Those things did not equate with the suffering and the grief and the passion that you had. So recalling the power of that cross-country bike ride, I thought there has to be something like that for the AIDS epidemic. So we organized this event called California AIDS Ride, and I had a consulting firm, nothing novel, for-profit fundraising consulting firm, and so it made sense to organize this under that for-profit umbrella, which would eventually become very controversial. But what we did is we organized a 7-day bike ride, 600 miles, from San Francisco to Los Angeles. You had to go the whole 7 days, you had to ride the whole 600 miles. And what was different about it is that we set a mandatory pledge minimum of $2,000. You had to raise $2,000 in order to go. And that just came from my major gift experience, but the charitable event policy up until that time had been to open your arms to anyone no matter what they had raised, which is the worst business model I ever heard of in my life. So that first event was very successful. We had 478 riders. We netted $1 million, which was huge for the charity that we were raising the money for. And we knew that we had tapped into a deep hunger on the part of some people to do extraordinary things in the face of the causes that they cared deeply about. So we began to expand the AIDS rides around the United States. We did them from Boston to New York, from Philadelphia to Washington, Austin to Dallas, the Twin Cities to Chicago. Then we created another event series just for medical research called the Vaccine Rides, and those were in more rugged terrain across Alaska, across the Continental Divide in Montana, a 10-day trek in South Africa in the Cedarburg Wilderness area. And in the midst of that, we looked at the issue of breast cancer, and here was a similar issue where people were losing their mothers and their daughters and their sisters and their wives. They were devastated. They wanted to do something big. There was nothing big for them to do. So we looked at walkathons and said, why are they always 10K? Like, who made up that rule? Let's create a really long walkathon. So we created this event called the Breast Cancer 3-Day that initially was a 60-mile walk from Santa Barbara to Malibu. And same deal, you had to raise $1,200, you had to walk the whole 60 miles, you had to sleep in a tent with a stranger. I always say providing that the stranger, of course, agreed to the arrangement. That event was successful. It netted $4 million, and so we began to expand those events around the country. And what was different is that we didn't want to be an event producer. You know, that wasn't not like, here's a money-making scheme producing events. We wanted to build literally the Disney of meaning. And so the Pilata Teamworks brand was sort of front and center on everything, so that there would be a brand loyalty developed to this umbrella organization, and we could get people to participate in events for causes that they didn't have any particular relationship to because of the strength of the brand. So 9 years into this, we had 182,000 people had walked or ridden in one of the events, and as Ken said, we raised $556 million, netted $305 million. We were the subject in 2002 of a Harvard Business School case study, which was sweet because Harvard Business School had rejected me for admission about 5 years earlier. They also rejected my book. It's published by Tufts, and last week they asked if I would blog on the Harvard Business Review, so I wish they'd get their act together. First go around. This is an example of one of the 5 sections of the tent city that we would build every evening. And there were mobile kitchens and mobile showers and hundreds of chemical toilets, mobile stages, and this all had to be taken apart in the morning, packed up, driven to the next site, and set back up before the riders or the walkers got there that evening. You do not want 6,000 low blood sugar level walkers coming into a camp that isn't set up with no food. So it was a military-like operation. But beyond the fundraising, beyond the logistics, what was always very special to me about these events was just the human beauty of them. You know, we never advertise them to athletes or cyclists. We advertise them to average people